Why are Americans more poor than Japanese citizens? Why does it look like more people are having trouble with money in the US than in Japan, which is one of the richest countries in the world? Could it be because of differences in how income is shared, the strength of social safety nets, or even something deeper in the culture of these countries? In this video, we'll look at the surprising reasons why the economies of Americans and Japanese people are so different. Are you ready to learn why having a lot of money doesn't always mean you'll be safe financially? Let's jump right in. A sharp contrast in income inequality. Income disparity is one of the biggest distinctions between the United States and Japan. Among developed nations, the United States has one of the greatest levels of income disparity. The United States routinely scores higher than Japan when it comes to income inequality as measured by the Gini coefficient. This indicates that there is a wider disparity in income distribution between the richest and poorest Americans in the United States. There is a huge pay gap in the United States, especially between people in low-paying service positions and those in high-paying industries like technology and finance. Despite living in a prosperous nation, a sizable section of the populace struggles to meet basic needs, due in part to this wage discrepancy. A disproportionate amount of the nation's wealth is held by the richest 1% of Americans. Japan, on the other hand, has a wealth and income distribution that is more balanced, which helps to stave off extreme poverty. A greater percentage of people live in poverty or conditions close to it as a result of the high degree of income disparity in the United States. Despite having a greater average income than Japan, more Americans experience financial hardship as a result of the unequal distribution of wealth. Policy frameworks and social safety nets. The robustness of the social safety nets in the two nations is another important distinction. Compared to the United States, Japan boasts a more extensive and easily accessible social safety net that lowers poverty and gives its people more economic stability. Japan's universal healthcare program guarantees access to healthcare for all of its residents. In contrast, the majority of the American healthcare system is private and comes at a high expense to the person. Even though there are programs like Medicaid and Medicare, they are not as extensive as the system in Japan, which leaves many Americans without enough coverage or with large medical debt. The Social Security system. Japan has a strong social security system that offers welfare programs that meet a variety of needs, pensions, and unemployment benefits. Despite its vast scope, the Social Security system in the United States is sometimes criticized for being inadequate, especially when it comes to helping the unemployed and low-income people. Japan makes significant investments in education. Public education is of a high caliber and university costs are lower than in the United States. The high cost of the American educational system, especially in higher education, results in a large amount of student debt that can impede one's ability to move up the economic ladder and fuel poverty. Japan's robust social safety nets lower the likelihood of poverty by protecting its inhabitants from economic shocks like job loss or health problems. Conversely, the safety net in the United States is thinner, resulting in a higher rate of poverty as many Americans do not receive the necessary support during difficult financial times. Social perceptions of riches and poverty. There are considerable differences between Japan and the United States in terms of how poverty is understood and how it is effectively addressed. The culture of Japan places a high focus on social peace, collective well-being, and a strong sense of obligation to support others, in contrast to the culture of the United States, which is more individualistic in nature. The common good is frequently valued more highly than individual achievement in Japanese society, which leads in laws and customs that favor more equality due to the fact that the common good is cherished more highly. On the other side, the American society places a strong focus on individual achievement and autonomy, which can result in expanded financial disparities and a reduction in support for those who are less fortunate. The shame associated with living in lowly conditions or receiving assistance from the government is less severe in Japan. In the United States, the stigma that is connected to poverty is the product of a cultural narrative that draws a connection between one's level of financial success and their personal sense of worth. People may be dissuaded from seeking assistance as a result of this, which may also result in a lack of political will to further fund the growth of social services. A collectivist culture like that of Japan fosters policies that work toward advancing equality and combating poverty. It is possible that the individualistic mindset that is prominent in the United States may lead to a decrease in support for social safety nets and an increase in acceptance of income inequality, both of which contribute to an increase in the poverty rates in the population of the country. Workplace policies and labor markets. There are significant disparities between the labor markets and employment practices in Japan and the United States, which have an effect on the number of people living in poverty and the level of economic security. In Japan, workers usually devote the majority of their careers to a single company, which has earned the country a reputation for its legendary lifelong employment history. As a result, this ensures a consistent income as well as a solid career. In spite of the fact that this system has undergone recent modifications, it is nevertheless distinct from the United States, where employment is typically less stable and job mobility is higher. It is common for Japanese companies to provide their employees with more generous perks, such as health insurance, pensions, and bonuses, which in turn raises the employee's standard of living considerably. A large number of low-wage employment in the United States have either very few or no benefits, which makes employees more prone to experiencing financial troubles. Benefits in the United States vary widely. Despite the fact that Japan is notorious for its lengthy work weeks, recent reforms have been implemented in an effort to reduce excessive workloads and improve the balance between work and personal life. Long workdays are also common in the United States, particularly for workers, particularly those from lower-class backgrounds, who may be required to work multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. This ends up causing tension as well as a decrease in the level of living. Japan's employment standards, notably the emphasis on job security and substantial benefits, contribute to the reduction of poverty due to the fact that they provide workers with a consistent income and support networks. When the economy is poor, the American labor market, which is characterized by a higher degree of job instability and less benefits, may render workers more prone to poverty. This is especially true when the economy is weak. Costs of living and housing. One of the primary reasons for the differential in poverty rates between the United States and Japan is the difference in the cost of living, particularly with regard to housing. Laws have been enacted by the Japanese government to ensure that there is a consistent supply of housing that is available at prices that are affordable, particularly in urban areas. Keeping prices at a lesser level is possible due to the fact that zoning regulations are more relaxed and allow for higher density housing. On the other hand, the United States of America is facing a significant challenge when it comes to affordable housing, particularly in large cities where factors such as zoning restrictions and high demand have led to an increase in housing costs. Homeownership is more prevalent in both countries, despite the fact that it is more prevalent in the United States because of its popularity. On the other hand, the cost of home ownership in the United States, which includes the debt associated with mortgages and property taxes, can result in unstable financial situations, particularly for families with low incomes. Generally speaking, the cost of living in Japan is more in line with earnings, but it is expensive in certain areas such as Tokyo. This is in part due to the fact that the government regulates the prices of essentials such as housing, healthcare, and transportation. Many people in the United States spend a significant portion of their income on housing, healthcare, and education, which makes their financial situation even more difficult and contributes to their financial destitution. The cost of living in the United States varies widely. The approach that Japan takes to housing and living expenses helps to prevent countries from falling into extreme poverty by making it easier to obtain essential items. The high cost of living in the United States, particularly with regard to housing, healthcare, and education, places a large amount of burden on a high number of households and contributes to an increase in the incidence of poverty. The idea that people in the United States are poorer than people living in Japan is influenced by a number of interrelated factors, including the discrepancy in income, the efficiency of social safety nets, cultural perspectives on wealth and poverty, actions in the job market, and the cost of living. Even though both countries have sophisticated economies, the ways in which wealth is distributed, social aid is provided, and cultural values are displayed have different effects on the individuals who live in each of these countries. A combination of strong social safety nets, cultural collectivism, safe employment practices, and fairly priced living expenditures have contributed to Japan's ability to reduce the prevalence of poverty and the severity of its effects. When compared to other countries, the United States of America is confronted with challenges that include higher costs of living, a culture that is more individualistic, weakening social safety nets, and increased income disparity, all of which contribute to higher rates of poverty. In order to find solutions to the problems of poverty and inequality that exist inside their respective nations, it is necessary for both the government and the people to acknowledge these distinctions. The United States of America and Japan have the potential to work together to construct societies that are more prosperous and equitable, which will be to the advantage of all of their residents. This can be accomplished by learning from each other's successes and failures. There are a lot of linked reasons why the economic situations of Americans and Japanese people are so different. There is a lot of income inequality in the United States. This, along with a weaker social safety net and higher living costs, makes it hard for many Americans to pay their bills, even though the country is generally wealthy. Japan's more even division of income, large social safety nets, and government control over living costs, on the other hand, help reduce extreme poverty and make the economy more stable. These results are also affected by how different cultures see wealth and poverty. For example, Japan's collectivist method makes people feel more connected to their community. Even though both countries have advanced economies, the fact that their policies, cultures, and economic structures are so different shows how complicated poverty and financial safety are. To solve these problems, we need to understand them more deeply and take careful steps to close the gaps and make economic opportunities more fair for everyone. Both the US and Japan can work to make their societies more welcoming and helpful for everyone by learning from each other's wins and failures.